What do a beheaded train conductor, a secret female detective, and the legendary author Mark Twain all have in common?
I mean, it sounds like a wild setup, right? But they actually all collide in the American West in the year 1890.
They really do. Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so glad you were joining us today because we have got a truly incredible set of sources to explore.
Yeah, we've got some amazing material today.
We're looking at excerpts from the historical mystery novel The Harvey Girl by Dana Stabenow, and that includes a deeply detailed map of the ATSF, that's the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, specifically charting its lines through the New Mexico territory.
It is a remarkably rich text. And, our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack exactly how this material operates. We aren't just going to recap a mystery for you.
No, definitely not.
We are going to look at how the author uses this narrative to weave together real historical figures, the genuinely grueling reality of frontier life, and the absolute excesses of the Gilded Age.
It paints this perfect snapshot of a country in a rapid, sometimes really violent transition, all heavily driven by the expansion of the railroads.
Exactly.
And it all centers around an amazing protagonist. You've got to meet Clare Wright. I mean, she's a 22-year-old orphan with a degree from Vassar.
Right.
But instead of settling into a quiet life as a school teacher, which, well, that would have been the expectation, right? She chose a much more lucrative and infinitely more dangerous career path. She's an undercover detective for the Pinkerton agency.
Which is such a fascinating choice by the author. Pinkerton was a massive, highly organized private intelligence and law enforcement agency in 1890.
Mm-hmm.
They often operated in spaces where federal law simply couldn't reach or, frankly, didn't even exist.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly rare for a woman to be a field operative at that time.
Oh, for sure.
But the text establishes her competence right from the start. We see her previous assignment before she even heads out west, and it shows exactly why a female operative had unique advantages.
Okay, let's unpack this because her methods are so far from a standard police investigation.
They really are.
She's down in Bienville, Mississippi, working a case involving $300,000 stolen from a local bank to infiltrate the home of the prime suspect, the bank's vice president, a man named Andrew Jackson Calhoun. She uses societal expectations of women to her advantage.
She totally weaponizes it.
Yes, she literally fakes falling off a horse in his front yard, playing the role of a frail, wealthy socialite who needs to be taken inside to recover.
Precisely. She doesn't just quietly look for fingerprints or footprints. She actively and psychologically manipulates the environment to force the suspect to reveal himself.
Right, because she understands that a guilty man living in a massive, quiet house is already paranoid.
Exactly. So what does she do?
So it's the middle of the night during a massive thunderstorm. Claire sneaks out of her room in a black velvet robe, picks the lock to Calhoun's office, and stages this elaborate ghost attack.
It's so theatrical.
It is. She smashes a window to let the storm in, drips fake blood all over his desk, and hurls a crystal paperweight at this gaudy portrait of Calhoun hanging on the wall.
And the reaction.
When he comes downstairs and sees the blood, he panics. He is entirely convinced that the roast of a clerk he murdered has come back for revenge.
It completely breaks his nerve. He runs out into the pouring rain, straight down to the creek on his property, and frantically digs up a hidden metal box containing nearly $299,750.
And Claire is right there waiting for him in the water.
It perfectly illustrates her intelligence and her flair for the dramatic, but also her deep understanding of human psychology. But she barely has time to dry off before Robert Pinkerton himself pulls her back to Chicago.
So why the sudden recall? Was the agency just moving her to another standard theft?
No. This was a massive escalation. In Chicago, she meets Fred Harvey. Now, we all know how Harvey essentially civilized Western train travel with his dining houses.
Right, the famous Harvey houses.
Exactly. But in this text, we see the absolute operational nightmare of keeping that empire running. The Red Mountain Express on the ATSF Railroad is being robbed. And we aren't talking about stagecoach bandits taking pocket watches from passengers.
No, this is much bigger.
Entire freight cars full of his restaurant supplies are being detached and stolen in the dead of night.
That requires serious coordination. You can't just quietly slip a massive freight car in your pocket.
Exactly. These robberies happen with clockwork precision, always on the night of a full moon, utilizing the smaller branch lines that intersect the high iron tracks. It requires knowledge of the train schedules, the track switches, and the cargo manifests.
It's an inside job.
It has to be.
Yeah.
What makes it a case for Pinkerton, and specifically for Claire, is the common denominator. The same conductor, a man named Harry Funston, was on board for all of the robbed trains.
So if this was clearly an inside job, why couldn't Pinkerton just interrogate the conductor?
Because on the last run, Funston was murdered. And it was incredibly gruesome. The text describes a masked man boarding the train, pulling Funston's head back and cutting his throat so deeply that later on, when the train engineers try to move Funston's body off the tracks,
oh man,
his head literally falls off.
That is brutal.
The violence is meant to send a message. So Fred Harvey hires Clare to go completely undercover to find the inside man orchestrating these massive, deadly thefts without alerting the syndicate.
Which brings us to her cover identity. Clare is sent to Montaña Roja in the New Mexico territory to work as a Harvey Girl at the local Harvey house.
Right into the belly of the beast.
And this particular establishment is managed by a man named Louis Abernathy. Right from the jump, he is intensely scrutinizing. He's hovering, checking her references, and just deeply unpleasant to be around.
He runs the house with an iron fist. And to maintain her cover, Clare actually has to do the job. She can't just pretend to be a waitress. She has to survive the reality of the work.
Which was no joke.
What's fascinating here is the cultural phenomenon of the Harvey Girls itself, and how the author uses it to ground the narrative. The West in 1890 was notoriously wild, incredibly male-dominated, and frankly, quite dangerous.
Yeah, not a tourist destination.
Not at all. Fred Harvey's entire business model relied on offering an oasis of high-quality, standardized, civilized dining to train passengers who were otherwise traveling through harsh deserts. To achieve that atmosphere, he exclusively hired respectable young women, mostly from the Midwest.
Right.
And he implemented incredibly strict rules to protect the brand's pristine reputation.
Including contracts stipulating they couldn't marry for at least their first 6 months on the job, right? They had curfews, uniform standards, and strict behavior protocols.
Absolutely. They were essentially ambassadors of Eastern civilization in a very uncivilized territory.
Yeah.
But the reality of maintaining that illusion was brutal physical labor.
Imagine you were working one of those shifts. The physical toll of this job is just staggering to read about. Your feet ache just thinking about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Clare is working 12-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week. It isn't just taking orders with a smile. She is constantly hauling these heavy, massive trays loaded down with thick monogrammed silverware and thick ceramic plates. She's pouring coffee from these giant, heavy silver urns that hold gallons of boiling liquid.
And the pacing is relentless.
Yes. When a train pulls in, you have exactly 30 minutes to serve an entire dining room of passengers a multi-course meal before the whistle blows and the train leaves.
It's frantic.
The logistics of feeding hundreds of people in half an hour require a military level of precision.
The standards were exacting, to put it mildly. The source material shares a brilliant anecdote about a surprise inspection by Fred Harvey himself to illustrate this.
Oh, the soup incident.
Yes. He arrives unannounced on a train, does a full white glove sweep of the dining room, and marches straight into the kitchen. He tastes the albondiga soup simmering on the stove, immediately realizes the chef used butter in the recipe instead of the required ingredients.
It was a huge violation of his recipe.
And he personally carries the massive boiling pot out the back door and dumps the entire thing in the dirt.
The entire pot. And the chef is just standing there, red-faced and terrified, watching a day's work soak into the desert. It shows you exactly the kind of pressure these women were working under. There was zero margin for error.
None.
But despite the exhaustion and despite Harvey's strict rules, these girls find ways to reclaim their own humanity. Claire's roommates, Florence, Ida, and Henrietta, they actually sneak out in a wagon in the dead of night to go to the Lightfoot music and dance parlor in town.
It adds a wonderful layer of camaraderie to the investigation. Claire, this tough, highly educated undercover agent, realizes she is developing a deep loyalty to these fellow working women. She covers for them with management. She genuinely likes them.
But that trip to the dance parlor also exposes Claire to the sheer duality of the town itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Montaña Roja is a perfect microcosm of the 1890s American West. The geography of the town tells the whole story. The ATSF Railroad essentially arrived and built a brand new, perfectly rectangular grid town right next to the original older Mexican and Indian settlement.
Literally side by side.
It's a place of rapid, chaotic expansion where the old agrarian world and the new industrial machine are violently colliding.
And when we say violent, we mean it. The lawlessness of the frontier is just shocking. The text gives us this incredibly visceral scene where Claire is just walking down the street running an errand. two cowboys, Georgie and Johnny, stumble out of a saloon.
And over a completely trivial joke, Georgie pulls his gun and shoots Johnny right in the stomach in broad daylight.
Johnny dies screaming in the dirt, his intestines exposed.
And the town's reaction to a man being murdered in the street.
Complete indifference. The crowd just steps around the body like it's a puddle. Wait, why wouldn't a crowd in a civilized railroad town do anything? Was the law really that non-existent?
It perfectly illustrates how cheap life could be on the frontier. The town sheriff, a man known as Uncle Fred Parker, is literally leaning against a wall nearby, sleeping off a drunk, and does absolutely nothing.
Unbelievable.
The killer, Georgie, just walks right back into the saloon to finish his drink. There is no functional justice system for the working class.
And the surreal cherry on top. A few nights later, when the Harvey girls sneak out to that dance parlor, Claire actually dances a Strauss waltz with Georgie, the killer. It's so jarring to see a brutal murderer participating in a polite society dance just days later.
But that raw, unpunished violence sits right next to the extravagant, almost offensive wealth of the Gilded Age. You have characters like Wash Gowan.
Oh.
He's the son of a coal miner who clawed his way up, and now he essentially owns half the territory. Mines, oil, cattle, local businesses, you name it. And he's just built this absurdly lavish Beaux-Arts mansion right outside of town.
It's like a European castle just dumped in the middle of the desert.
Exactly. And for context, Beaux-Arts was a heavily ornamented, highly theatrical architectural style popularized in Paris. It featured massive columns, grand staircases, and elaborate statues.
Very subtle.
Right. It was essentially designed to scream old money and European sophistication to anyone looking at it, which makes it incredibly out of place in the dusty New Mexico territory.
And the arrogance of it. He has a Latin motto carved right into the stone pediment over his front door. Voluntatem mem fortitudo mea ita meum, which translates to my will, my strength, my way.
Gowan represents a different kind of violence. He isn't out in the street shooting people like Georgie, but his violence is systemic. The text details how he drove an Indian agent named Walter Dabney into a fraudulent scheme, systematically ruined a rancher to buy his land for pennies on the dollar.
Just ruthless.
And he essentially keeps the town's magistrate and that useless drunk sheriff in his pocket. He is the law, simply because he has the capital.
It's important to note here, for you listening, that we are exploring the author's specific critique of Gilded Age economics in this novel. We aren't endorsing a specific political viewpoint on capitalism, but rather unpacking how the source material portrays these ruthless corporate monopolies to build its narrative and heighten the stakes for the characters.
Absolutely. Within the context of the story, Gowan's untouchable status makes Claire's job exponentially harder. Who do you turn to for help when the local authorities are literally bought and paid for by the primary suspects?
Here's where it gets really interesting. Claire isn't the only Pinkerton agent in town. Because the ATSF robberies are causing such massive financial losses, Robert Pinkerton sent backup. And the backup. Just some of the most famous figures of the Wild West.
The historical cameos in this narrative are seamlessly integrated. They aren't just name drops. They function actively within the plot.
Right as Claire gets off the train on her very first day, she witnesses the legendary Bat Masterson, who is actually working as a Pinkerton agent in this text, publicly shaking down an operative named Eugene Doster for a $300 debt right on the train platform.
Just completely in the open.
Masterson totally humiliates him in front of a crowd to assert dominance. And the notorious Tom Horn is also lurking around Montaña Roja. You get the immediate sense that this town is a powder keg just waiting for a match.
But perhaps the most prominent and thematic cameo happens during a massive open house party that Wash Gowan throws at his new mansion to show off his wealth to the territory. The Harvey girls are hired to cater the event, which puts Claire right in the middle of the action, serving champagne.
And she practically runs into Samuel Clemens Mark Twain himself.
In the flesh.
In the iconic white suit and everything. What is the author doing by dropping Mark Twain into the middle of a Gilded Age mansion party in the desert?
Twain acts as the moral and intellectual conscience of the text. The author uses him perfectly to comment on the setting. Looking around Gowan's extravagant, gaudy mansion, Twain remarks to the guests that wealth is a narrowing thing for a man who makes a god of it instead of a servant.
Wow, that cuts right through it.
He cuts right through the facade of Gowan's European architecture. He also gets into this wonderful, playful religious debate with a local priest, Padre Cristobal, right in the middle of the party. It brings the intellectual life and the philosophical debates of the 1890s right into the dusty frontier.
It provides such a sharp contrast to the cowboy shootouts in the street. But while Twain is debating theology, Clare is working the case. The investigation is really heating up. She has zeroed in on her boss, the Harvey house manager, Louis Abernathy.
Right, the creepy manager.
She strongly suspects he's the inside man cooking the books to hide the stolen freight on the railroad's end.
What specific evidence led her to Abernathy?
A few days prior, she picked the lock to his office to snoop around his ledgers, and while she was hiding, she actually overheard him having a secret tryst with Henrietta, one of Clare's Harvey Girl roommates.
Oh, wow.
And Henrietta is furious because she thought Abernathy was going to marry her, and now he's backing out. So you have missing inventory, cooked books, and severe romantic tension everywhere. Abernathy is under immense pressure.
Which leads directly to the climax of our source material. During the noise and chaos of Gowan's party, with hundreds of guests distracted by the music and the food, Clare takes the opportunity to secretly sweep the mansion.
Smart move.
She's looking for anything that might connect Gowan's empire or Abernathy to the train robberies.
Imagine sneaking through a massive unfamiliar house where getting caught could literally mean a bullet. She slips down a quiet hallway away from the party and finds an unlocked door. She walks in and discovers that Wash Gowan has built himself a bizarre private museum.
It is the ultimate display of Gilded Age acquisition. Buying global history just because you have the money to do so, regardless of whether it belongs in New Mexico.
Exactly. The room is filled with these priceless, almost absurd antiquities. There's a doctor's bag from the ruins of Pompeii, a diadem from ancient Alexandria, and supposedly the actual coronation crown of Alfred the Great.
Just sitting in a glass case.
Thousands of miles from England.
But as fascinating as the artifacts are, they aren't what she's looking for. What does she actually find in the room?
Clare notices a strong, coppery smell cutting through the stale air of the museum. She walks over to this heavy, dark red velvet drape that's covering a massive window. She pulls the fabric back, and there is Louis Abernathy. He's lying dead on the floor in a massive pool of tacky blood. And the detail that just chills you, the thing that confirms her worst fears, his throat has been slashed from ear to ear, it is the exact same brutal execution style that was used on Harry Funston, the train conductor from the Red Mountain Express.
The killer's in the house. And it completely upends her working theory. If Abernathy was the inside man, why was he executed? Was he getting greedy and demanding a larger cut of the stolen freight? Was he simply a loose end that the syndicate needed to tie up before the Pinkertons closed in?
So many questions.
The locked room nature of the murder, occurring right in the middle of a crowded party hosted by a ruthless baron, elevates the stakes exponentially for Clare. She is now trapped in a mansion with a professional butcher.
So what does this all mean? Why does a story like this matter to you, the listener, beyond just being a gripping mystery? Because this deep dive shows us that history isn't just a list of treaties, dates on a timeline, or dry economic facts about railroad expansion.
Not at all.
History's the grueling, blister-inducing work of a 19-year-old Harvey girl carrying silver trays until her back gives out just to maintain an illusion of civilization. It's the sudden, ignored violence of a cowboy dying in the dirt of a brand new street while the law sleeps. It's the unchecked wealth of men building castles in the desert while the people who built the tracks struggle to survive.
It really paints a picture.
Fiction that is grounded in this level of meticulous research makes the reality of the past visceral and tangible. You can feel the heat of the kitchen, you can smell the gun smoke in the saloon, and you can truly understand the human cost of rapid progress.
This raises an important question, something for you to think about long after we finish here. Consider the legacy of American expansion and the great railroads that connected the coasts. Yes, they brought incredible feats of civilization. They brought fresh oysters in refrigerated cars to towns that had never seen an ocean, and they brought minds like Mark Twain to the harsh desert.
But there's a flip side.
But they also brought ruthless corporate monopolies, industrial-scale corruption, and a system where human life was too often measured merely in dollars and cents. The next time you take a modern convenience or a fast cross-country trip for granted, look a little closer at the map. Wonder about the untold gritty stories and perhaps the literal bodies that had to be buried beneath its foundation for that progress to happen.